Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today we play c6 against d4, and my opponent very kindly transposes into the Caro Kann, which is one of the reasons why I play c6 against d4, and I'm happy to play the Slav as well, but I'd rather play the Caro. My opponent goes knight to c3, and we will take and play knight to f6. Now, if my opponent takes, we will have a Tartakower. A lot of the time, you'll face knight to g5, the alien gambit, and I have a whole video dedicated on refuting the alien gambit, but in a way that doesn't lead to the complications that are associated with it normally. After like knight g5, h6, knight takes f7, I don't want any of that, so I don't recommend that. But okay, my opponent takes. We take back with the e-pawn. And this is a very interesting line. And knight to f3 is not the best move from white. That knight is actually kind of vulnerable to bishop g4. But not just yet. What we want to do is see this bishop commit itself to the d3 square first. And then we will go ahead and play bishop to g4. And the issue for white is that there's no good way to break this pin. You can go h3, I'm of course going to move back. Because one, you do not have a knight come to d2 to defend the knight and allow the queen to move away, right? Like c3, queen c2 would be ideal. You also have committed your bishop to d3 already. So if you want to break the pin, there's a good chance you'll have to bring the bishop back to e2, which I'm happy if white wants to waste time like that. Sorry, let me just fix my microphone. So we could consider bishop c7, queen d6, try and take the knight and deliver mate. You could try that. I'm a little bit concerned about like bishop c7, bishop e3, queen d6, g4, bishop g6. I mean, that still looks good for us, but I don't think we're really accomplishing anything. So let's just go rook e8, which is a normal Tartakower move. This is kind of the setup of pieces you tend to get in the Tartakower. And the reason this knight on f3 also sucks is because of our pawn on f6. Now, it's technically a double pawn, right? But you'll notice this relationship between the knight and the pawn allow our pawn to dominate the knight's immediate forward movement, right? So the knight can't jump into my position. Typically, in Caro Kann structures, let's say we have an exchange Caro Kann and we have pawns on like e6, d5, and my opponent has d4, c3, right? That's a Carlsbad structure, which is typical in the exchange Caro. The knight will often jump into e5 after a move like g4. Wait, let me turn the light on quickly. I don't know if that'll help much. No, that hasn't helped at all. Sorry about that. Normally, the knight can jump into e5, but because we have the pawn on f6, we actually have really good control over g5 and e5, which is quite nice. So the Tartakow was one of those openings where I think I've personally found that sometimes the plans can be difficult to really understand because there's unless you go for c5 in some of these lines, which always feels counterintuitive because you allow d5 with a protected passed pawn. A lot of the time, these Tartakow positions are either black executing some kind of kingside attack, white executing some kind of kingside attack. But if both players play well and stop kingside attacks from being executed, it can lead to kind of a trade fest down the e-file. Although, with my opponent playing this inaccurate knight to f3 line, I think we're definitely in the driver's seat. Okay, bishop to e3. Again, we can consider bishop c7, queen d6. Which, to be honest, because now rook e1 doesn't come with the same threat of trades, I don't have to rush to connect my rooks with like knight d7, queen c7 immediately, because my opponent's just blocked off the e-file voluntarily. So I think I will go for bishop c7 and play like queen d6, knight d7. I will force the move g4 out of my opponent as well, because let's say he plays rook e1, I'll go queen d6. There's no... Is there bishop f4? Oh, there might actually be bishop f4 after rook e1. Ooh, that's cool. let me see. Rook e1, queen d6, bishop f4. If I take the bishop, I get mated on e8. If I take the rook and queen takes, then if I take the bishop, I again get mated. So, oh yeah, that's actually really cool. I have to be very aware of that. Now, I think that only occurs if rook e1 is played. So if rook e1, I probably have to play knight to d7. Okay, he goes for the immediate g4. All right, he probably didn't need to commit to that just yet, but that's fine. We get the infamous pawn cube, courtesy of Eric Rosen, and now we basically win the game because we have the pawn cube. On an actual note, the pawn cube is actually a very strong structure. We control all of these squares with this pawn cube, essentially, which keeps the white pieces completely out of our position. That's not how a bishop moves. Oh my god. Okay. Queen b3. Okay. Interesting. Going after b7. Makes sense. There's a few moves we can play. We can go bishop b6, stopping the attack, but, I mean, my bishop sucks on this diagonal. We could consider queen to d5, attacking the knight and the queen, which effectively forces a queen trade. We get an isolated d-pawn, but it does actually look decent after knight c6. The white pieces look like they're terrible there. We could set a trap with queen d7. And if queen takes b7, we have bishop to h2 check, and then we pick up the queen. However, if queen d7, king g2, so that this doesn't come with check, then we're in the same boat and we've accomplished nothing. So I think I actually quite like this queen d5 move. Because although we're giving ourselves an isolated d-pawn, I don't think white can do a whole lot about it unless he plays c4. And c4 would give him an isolated d-pawn. But the thing is with our isolated d-pawn is it's not very easily accessible to the white pieces. There's, if my opponent takes, of course, there's no open file against the d5 pawn. The bishop, of course, can't target the pawn because it's on a dark square. And the knight, because of this relationship where it's like 3 diagonal squares, it takes the knight forever to be able to see that square. So, for example, the knight would have to do something like knight to e1, knight to c2, knight to b4 to even look at the square in the first place, which is an awful lot of time spent. My opponent could play a move like king g2 here and just defend the knight. And the point would be that he offers a trade of queens on his terms and opens up the A file for himself, which would be a reasonable idea. I don't think there's a problem with that for us. I mean, knight d7, like king g2, queen b3, a b3, knight d7, rook e1. I don't know, I don't really see any issues. Maybe a6, double up on the e file. We have options. I don't think we can really exploit the doubled pawn on the b file. It's probably more of an asset for white than anything else, but we'll see what he chooses. He can take the pawn. And then we will take on f3. Whoops. And I don't know. I think we have very good attacking opportunities there, to be honest. So after he takes like my bishop, I can take on h3. I have potential sacrifices. It looks pretty good. If queen here, and he takes here, then he's just getting slaughtered after a move like rook takes e3. Yeah, that looks like it's game over. It would have been interesting if he went for that, but he goes for the queen trade. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. a4? Okay, maybe he's trying to stop b5 so that I can't clamp down on c4. Yeah. I could go a5 myself. b4, take. I don't think I need to commit anything there. I think I can probably just develop. with knight to c6. Maybe my knight can jump into the light squares. That would be interesting. So probably b4 to stop knight to a5 makes sense. But of course, then you're weakening your c-pawn. And if b4, I can probably play a move like rook c8. And this is a very, very weak pawn. It's a typical backwards pawn. In this structure is actually quite reminiscent of like Caro Kann exchange variations on the queen side with the 3-on-2 or the 4-on-3. So okay, my opponent goes rook to e1. I'm going to go knight to a5 to try and invade the position. Okay, knight d2. Countering my knight. f5 is quite interesting. I think I want to play that because the threat is, of course, f4 to trap this bishop. I think in an episode 2 days ago, from when this gets uploaded, we had a similar idea where we could play f5 with an attack on a queen, and after the queen moved, we could play f4 and trapping the bishop in very similar circumstances. So yeah, I had that very much front of mind in this game because I missed it in that game. My opponent exchanges, which weakens his kingside structure. Ooh, b4. I think I can just retreat because his knight sucks. I don't want to come into c4 and trade. That just gives him a protected passed d-pawn anyway. Coming back, there's nothing wrong with that. f4 is still a threat. If he plays b5, I can always go back to a5 and just exert general pressure on the position. Also, now that he's committed to b4, his c-pawn is super weak. Okay, bishop to g5. I think f6 looks very strong. And his bishop really doesn't have many squares. Really doesn't. Like here, f4 looks like it almost wins, except there's f3. And then g5, bishop f2. So we could go g5, bishop g3, f4, bishop h2, and the bishop's just out of the game. We could also play bishop to f4, hitting the knight. Knight to f3. Do we accomplish anything by forcing the knight to f3? I don't think so. Let's go g5 and f4 and just send the bishop to the shadow realm. That looks really good. Really, really good. And of course, I'm not taking my opponent because then he'll take back with his rook and he'll have the e-file. I want him to take me so I can take and I can have the e-file. I'm well aware the c-file could be very important, but I think that's more of a long-term plan, right? But now there's things going on that need to be addressed elsewhere in the position, like this bishop. I want to kick it all the way back to h2 and make sure that it's the most useless piece ever seen on a chessboard, which is the goal. Now, on the downside, after bishop g3, I don't know why my opponent's thinking so long, by the way. What? Why would you not do that? I mean, your bishop sucks, but giving it up for a pawn? Really? Okay. I mean, I'll take it. I'll take it. It would have been really nice if my opponent had taken on b7 and we'd taken on f3, because there were so many tactics going on there. I thought we would have a really nice position. But yeah, my opponent makes my life very easy. I'm just going to go bishop to f4. Stop this knight. My bishop can't be attacked because there's no pawns on the G or E files. I maintain the pressure on the E file. I maintain my control over E5. I can bring my king up. I can play a move like rook to E4 and then prepare to double up. This is basically game over. I mean, we still need to ensure we don't blunder anything, and we need to make sure we don't let these pawns roll too much. That would be the way to lose this position with black, but my opponent's definitely been very, very nice to me there, which I'll take, but very confusing decision. I mean, why would you take that pawn? I mean, yeah, I get your bishop sucks. I know. But it's still better to have the bishop. And then you can apply pressure with moves like h4 and knight f3 to try and break the g5 pawn open. And if you can do that, maybe you can win the f pawn back. Again, like, maybe, maybe not, but better than what this is. Okay, king f1. Cool. Let's go king f7 to support the rook. Yeah, he's doing the same thing. I don't know why he's voluntarily trading with me, but sure. Okay, well, that allows this, but then there's that, I suppose. So let's go king f6. And we could play this, going after the c-pawn, which he can't defend. Does allow knight c5. Take, take, take. Yeah, I mean, that's just completely winning, isn't it? I could play bishop d6, just stopping anything, which is the other option. But I think bishop d2 makes more sense, because all three of these pawns are going to fall very quickly. Very quickly. He could throw in b5, but then I get knight a5, and then b7 is defended. So knight c5 doesn't come with a threat anymore. So that's very, very nice. Again, we still want to try and be as accurate as we can in this type of position. We still want to try and play with some level of precision, because I know a lot of you would find a way to mess this up with the black pieces here and allow your opponent to get a draw for no reason. Like, we do have to be careful we don't trade too many pawns, because we could get to an endgame where even we have a bishop, knight, and pawn versus a knight, and my opponent sacks the knight for the pawn. Can you checkmate with a knight and bishop? I actually don't know if I can, to be totally honest. So, like, I don't want to get to that kind of endgame. It's completely unnecessary. So I want to keep pawns on the board, which is a big one here. Just so there is massive, just loads of different ways that we can win, basically. Opponent's running down the clock a bit. I'll pause the video, wait till he moves. Oh, no, he literally just moved. Okay, well, then we get knight to a5, which is what I wanted anyway, to support b7 so that knight c5 doesn't come with a threat. He may try oh my god, he may try knight to b4 because he sets the trap of bishop c3, knight d5 with a fork. This is the kind of thing that some of you may fall for. But after knight b5, I'm just going to go king to e6. Yeah, and he plays it. We're just going to go king e6, defending the d5 pawn. And the knight has no entry into the position, so he'll probably just have to retreat. Whoa, that is ugly. Ugly. Alright, well. We could be really cruel here. Try and be really cruel. With knight to c4. So the king can't get rid of my bishop. And my bishop kind of stops the knight from really doing anything. He can go to b4 still, but that would just give us the c-pawn. And we can maybe go like f4 and bring the king in. That's an option. We could go a5, try and exchange and play pawn a5 again to stop knight to b4. And if we keep controlling the c1 square with the bishop, even if the bishop's back on f4, then the knight won't be able to move. Because he also won't be able to move the c-pawn, so he will never get access to c3. I think that's what I want to do. I think that's what I want to do. That kind of constrictive play makes it a lot easier. But we'll see what he goes for. A little bit surprised he's playing on, but like I said, we still want to try and be precise. We still want to try and win in the like best and easiest way possible. And at the end of the oh my, why didn't I have my camera like this the whole time? This is way better. But and like I said, a lot of you would find a way to mess this up. So I'm going to show you how not to mess this up, basically. I'm going to pause the video, though, because he's taking forever. Okay, we finally have a move. King to e2. And I think we'll continue with the plan of a5. You can't get rid of my knight. There's no pawn that can make my knight move, so my bishop is very well defended. And if my opponent doesn't take en passant, then I control b4, which means that your knight now has no way back into the game, which makes this very hard to play. And if you do take en passant, then I'll take back, and then I'll play a5 again. And if you play en passant, and then I take, and then you play a5 yourself, then I'll retreat the bishop, and then take with the knight. not take with the knight immediately because then I'd hang the bishop. So he takes. Again, a5 would be a nice trap for him to set. I suppose I have to be a little bit careful of like a5. I don't know, like bishop f4, knight to b4, because I can't actually defend the a6 pawn. But I have time to take his a5 pawn. But that's probably the best way for white to play the position. To try not to allow me to have an easy win by playing a5 myself. But we'll see what he does. We'll see what he does. He might take a million years over this again, though. Hopefully not. And it's also crucial that I still have 3 pawns on the board. Well, 4, but I'm saying if these get exchanged, which is likely, then I still have enough. I still have plenty of pawns so that one of them at least should get through and create a queen. And he does go pawn to a5, which is probably the best move. Let's drop the bishop back to give our knight the ability to take so it doesn't have to defend the bishop anymore. This is good play from my opponent. Let's take. But now we also get bishop to d6. Now we get bishop d6. And we use this like bishop-knight relationship where my bishop literally controls every square the knight can go to. And so if it goes anywhere, then I'll just take it. And I'll happily exchange, whack the knight on c4, and convert this relatively easily. Or even just have the knight blockade the pawn wherever it may be. So let's say, like, knight c5, take. I can always whack the knight on c6 to blockade, and then use my king to muscle out my opponent's king. And if he doesn't move the knight and just leaves it on a6, I'm not actually going to go chase it. That's unnecessary. I can just use my knight and play the game with these 2 pieces not participating, right? Because they just cancel each other out. I don't need to go and win the knight because it always has a protected square to go to anyway. So nothing changes. I'm just making it make the move. But it doesn't matter if it makes the move or not. It doesn't matter if it gets exchanged or not, because even if it doesn't, it's still doing nothing, right? Okay, my opponent's made his move, king to d3. Doesn't really change anything. Let's just go knight to c4. Again, if the knight moves, well, he's not going to move here, obviously, but if the knight moves to b4 or c5, then I'll just take it. So I can bring my knight into the game, harass the king a bit. I don't know, maybe give a check and threaten to invade. I think what I probably need to do is play a move like f4 and try and muscle my way in with the king. And if a move like f3, I can always come around like this and win the h-pawn. And something like g4 and then start pushing. I suppose white could try to create a passed pawn with one of these knight moves, which is kind of annoying. But he's also going to run out of moves at some point, so he commits to it straight away. Okay. Take. Still going to be slightly careful. My pawns are creating a bit of a wall for the king, though. My knight's controlling e5, so if, like, king d7 and king d4, king c6, he can't invade anywhere. Yeah, he can't. So he'd have to make a pawn move. Could give this check. King here, check. That probably seems easier, to be honest. Probably seems easier. Just to get the knight to c6 as a blockading piece and then bring my king into the game. I think I prefer that. I know I could move my king around, but it feels kind of passive. I mean, I should win the pawn by force, but I don't know. There's moves like f4, which, like, I have to, like, take, and then the h-pawn starts running. So let's say, like, king d7, king d4, king c6, f4. That's actually kind of scary. Like, take h4. I mean, yeah, I should probably have a move like knight. Oh, no, I don't have that even. Yeah, that's actually quite scary. So again, there's ways to mess this position up with the black pieces, even when we're up a whole piece for a pawn in a king and pawn endgame. So I'd rather play it like this and just get rid of the danger with my knight and then use my king to cover f4, right? Again, there's still ways for white to try and play this. For example, king e3, king e5, f4 looks interesting. Like, take king f3, I think that's quite nice. So if king to e3 was played, I think I would probably play pawn to f4, followed by king to f5. But okay, he moves back. Now we can go king e5. If f4, we can take with the king, which means that the h-pawn doesn't become a passed pawn. If he goes king e3 himself, which he probably has to, otherwise I'm going to do this, and my knight and pawn do an excellent job of creating a force field to stop the king from entering the position. I like to think in like these king endgames of force fields being created by pieces and pawns and kings, like where we create a force field to stop the king from entering the position, right? And also on b4. So like the only conceivable way he can get in would be by going like through all these light squares. Makes things easier to conceptualize and visualize. So okay, let's go f4. Again, I'm trying to create a zugzwang position here where my king pushes my opponent's king out. And if I ever need to waste a move, I can always play a move like knight a5 because you can't push anyway, right? King f5, I'm going to stop this, of course. And now this is the zugzwang I was talking about. If this moves, I take. If this moves, I take. So these pawns can't move, of course. So you have to move your king, except, whoops, force field, you've got to go back. And you have to let my king into e4. You have no choice. So, you know, this is kind of how I like to think about endgames, and makes things a lot easier for me to sort of play more accurately and get rid of counterplay as much as possible. Let's go king e4. I'm expecting pawn to f3, kicking my king back. Yeah, there we go. But now my opponent gets rid of an avenue for his king to enter the position, meaning that these pawns are not moving effectively. Like, nothing's happening over there now. So if I move like king to d3, I mean, I have options. Knight a5 I quite like, I think. He'd even play... no. Let's just go knight a5, stop pawn to c4. I don't want my opponent to trade, which pushes my opponent's king back. If king e2, king e6, king d3, king d7, king d4, king c6, king e5, king c5, king f5, king c4, king g5, king c3, h4, d4, h5, d3, h6, d2, h7, d1 promote. My opponent promotes with check. So that's no good. This is the kind of king and pawn endgame calculation that could be quite useful. But okay. If king to d2, by the way, we just have a check picking up the pawn. So I'm expecting king to e2. Okay, well that's a free pawn. I assume he wants to go c4, but it just doesn't work anymore because of knight d4. And I just win everything. So not a very stubborn way to play for my opponent. Even in these basically lost endgames, you still want to be as stubborn as you can and make your opponent's life as difficult as you can. But yeah, made my life a bit easy there. Let's go king g4. Just push my opponent's king back. It might even be easier to move the knight away and get it out of the way, because king and 2 is very easy to convert. Let's go king to g3. The king will be forced to pick a side. Then we just go to the other side. My knight covers f2. Not really that big a deal, but... And I'm just going to sack the knight. I'll sack this pawn as well. All I need is one pawn, so... The easiest thing to do is just say, okay, my king covers all of these squares, so I can just push and promote. No need to overcomplicate things. You should all be able to checkmate with a king and a queen, right? Okay, now I'm going to bring my king around this way, because we create the box. Now we shut him off on this file, and then we'll just chase the king, deliver the mate. Awesome. Okay, very interesting game. Very interesting game. And the Tartakower is a difficult opening for the uninitiated, so hopefully you learned a lot, and a lot about endgame play. let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so we played at 88.6% accuracy, my opponent at 81.5. Let's jump into the analysis. So, whoops, wrong side. My opponent goes d4. I like to play c6, which invites my opponent into a Caro Kann. If you play a London with bishop to f4, then we get what I have dubbed the Centurion system with queen to b6. Very powerful move, if I may say so. You can see the computer quite likes it. So anyway, e4, d5, knight c3 to Tartakower, knight f6. As I said, knight to g5 is the beginning of the alien gambit. And if you want to learn how to play against that, check out my Alien Gambit video on my channel. But my opponent plays the Tartakower with knight f6, ef6, knight to f3. And you can see the computer doesn't like knight to f3. So the evaluation right now is like plus 0.3. Knight f3 puts it at like plus 0.01. It's basically dead equal. So we go bishop d6. I don't go bishop g4 straight away, because then my opponent always has the option of bishop e2, which makes this pin less powerful, right? Because it's no longer a pin. So we delay. Bishop d6, bishop d3, castles. I mean, if you play a move like h3 here, then I'll just give a check. You'll go bishop to e3. I mean, there's lots of moves, but like knight a6, if you take that, I think it's good for us. After queen a5, c3, we pick this up. You can't castle. Queen e2. We could take and just leave the king in the center of the board. F5, F4, it's very nice. So my opponent castles. We go bishop g4, h3. Of course, we do not need to take. We can just retreat. Then pawn c3. Interestingly, the best move is bishop to f5, which is such an odd move. I don't really understand. Queen d3? This is how the computer wants to break the pin. Okay, that's unbelievable. And then if here, white is losing, because if he takes with the queen, I take this, and if he takes like this, then I have g6. I've actually played this exact idea in an over-the-board game before. Not in this exact move order, but this exact same idea. My opponent went c3, queen c2 in that one. And he didn't go for it. He didn't go for it, unfortunately. But the point is, you can't do this like you normally would, because rook g8. He actually played king h1, so that didn't work anymore. But anyway, cool idea, and it can happen, because it's happened to me, almost. Anyway, c3, rook e8, bishop to e3, we go bishop c7, not the best move, but, you know. g4, bishop d6, take, and the position is just better for black. After queen b3, I go queen d5. Computer considers this an inaccuracy, but I'm kind of baiting my opponent into taking on b7, which is not good. After queen f3, if you take here, then you just lose on the spot after rook takes e3. If you take, then just check and mate. You can't do that, and everything else is bad anyway. And if you take here, then I can just take on h3, and then material's equal, but I have a big initiative on the king. The best move is this, giving up the g-pawn, king h2, knight d7. We're up a pawn even. You can go queen c6, but rook a8, let's say queen back to a6, and now you're losing. You're losing because of rook c5. Wow. Threatening mate. And then if you take, then rook e5. That's ridiculous. Anyway, my opponent takes. We take back. And by the way, I think the best move was king g2. And then I was going to take on b3 and play knight d7 was my idea, which the computer thinks is good. So queen d5, cd5, a4, not the best move. We go knight c6, rook fe1. Yeah, the computer really wants the immediate f5. It took me a bit of time to spot this as the idea. But knight a5, knight d2, then I go f5. G takes is not good, because you just ruin your own pawn structure for no reason. b4, knight c6, and bishop g5 is just a really bad move. I was expecting a knight move to give the bishop breathing room. So if f4, you can go bishop d2. Or a move like f3, so that if f4, you have breathing room, right? I thought that made a lot of sense. But my opponent decided to go bishop g5, which just makes his life worse. If you do this, then I trap you. So bishop h4, I go g5, And I don't know why he didn't go for this. It's very bad, obviously, but at least you have the bishop. And you can try and chip away at my g5 square. So let's say king f7, knight f3, I don't know, like rook e4, h4. Here I do have g4, followed by g3 probably, to be fair. It does just suck for white. But you can try. You can try. But just playing bishop takes g5, I mean, thank you. Take, knight f3. Bishop f4 is the best move, covering g5. King f1, king f7. Take, 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 take. Everything gets taken, which makes my life very nice. Computer wants this. And then here, yeah, I suppose. That's actually probably the cleaner way to do it. But anyway, I do this. Bishop d2, b5, knight a5, knight b4, king e6, knight a2, because he needs to defend c3. And here I thought I was a genius with a5. But to be fair, my opponent played the only good move. Then again, there's not many moves. Let's say king d3, I go a5, and your knight can't enter the game ever. So like f3, bishop back, the knight has no moves. So you can just shuffle the king, and then I will literally just walk over here. And there's basically nothing you can do about it. So that was the plan. My opponent combated it very nicely. And we go bishop d6. Of course, if you do something like this, I'll play take, take, knight c4, cover the promotion, something like here. I can even play knight d6 and like blockade like this. And then win d4, so you probably have to go to d5. And then I create this barrier against the white king. It's just miserable for white. But anyway, king d3, knight c4. He then trades with me. And I was initially going to go king to d7. But the issue is, and we're still completely winning, but let's say king d4, king c6. There's moves like f4, which are just kind of scary. The computer realizes the white king actually can't get back in time, and we're the ones that are winning, but we don't need to risk anything like that. There's no point. So I just go knight e5, bring the knight back to c6, and then bring the king up. I thought that king e3 was much better, because if king e5, f4 is the best move, and that's kind of scary for us to deal with. Computer still thinks we're fine, but after this, I mean, we're getting dangerously close to losing all of our pawns, and white does have two passed pawns, which, you know, is kind of scary. Of course, we can't, if all the pawns get traded, it's a draw. So I thought it was easier to do this. King f5, king e2, bring the king in, kicks me back. And here, I thought that white could be much more stubborn with king to e2. And if knight to c4, I mean, king d3, there's king e6 coming around like this. But we still have to be careful, of course. Computer still thinks this is fine after knight d2, picking this up, but we don't want to risk anything. So my opponent makes my life very easy. We bring the knight, win all the pawns, and then the rest of the game kind of just plays itself, right? Just shepherd the pawn up. I can sacrifice everything else, deliver the checkmate with the king and queen, nothing special. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see another very interesting Caro Kann game, check out the video up here. If you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.